Good afternoon from Kiev. I'm Markian Belinsky, Vice President of the US-Ukraine Foundation for Field Operations here in Ukraine. Before we proceed, I have a couple of technical announcements to make. If you'd like to listen to the Ukrainian translation of this broadcast, please engage your translation mode in the Portuguese channel. Unfortunately, Zoom do not yet have a Ukrainian label, so we've borrowed the Portuguese label. I don't think we'll cause any international incidents through that, but you will be able to listen to the whole broadcast in Ukrainian if you so choose. Also, you have the option of asking questions through the Q&A mode. If you'd like to use your names, I'll read those out. If you want your questions to be anonymous, you can exercise that option as well. This is the second of two broadcasts in 2 days. Yesterday, we discussed the question of Black Sea security, regional security, and particularly Ukraine and Western interests as they relate to Russian behavior over recent years. Obviously, Crimea featured prominently in that discussion. But today we'll focus exclusively on the situation within Crimea itself. Today's panel is just as interesting and diverse as yesterday's. We're happy to have with us Anton Korinevich, the permanent representative of the President of Ukraine in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea. We also have Natalia Belitsa, senior researcher at the US-Ukraine Foundation's partner organization, the Philip Orlik Institute for Democracy here in Kiev. We have Idil Izmirli, associate professor at the University of Maryland and visiting scholar at the George Mason University School for Conflict Analysis and Resolution. And we're also fortunate to have with us Lilia Navayeva and Velida Kent. These ladies are Crimean Tatar Americans, mother and daughter in fact, whose lives were and are shaped by the experience of exile within the former Soviet Union. Holding two such events in 2 days at this time represents the Foundation's modest contribution to commemorating and maintaining awareness of the mass deportation of the Crimean Tatars, the Surgun, on May 18th, 1944. With this in mind, we feel it's appropriate to devote a few minutes silence in memory of the victims of the crime perpetrated by the Soviet Union in 1944, and to reflect on the suffering of the Crimean Tatars and other pro-Ukrainian activists under the current Russian occupation of Crimea. Okay, thank you. There is a view that Crimea is becoming something of a secondary issue among the international community, the analytical community, compared to events that are unfolding in eastern Ukraine, the hostilities in Donbass. And that this differentiation between Donbass and Crimea is allowing Russia an opportunity to continue with and establish its toxic narrative regarding what is actually happening in Crimea. Indeed, many of President Zelensky's critics and opponents believe that a perceived uncertainty in his policy is partially responsible for creating this kind of informational environment. However, I think it's only fair to point out that on Monday, the President convened a meeting with members of the Tatar community and officials, including with Mr. Korinevich, with a view to setting up a task force that would address the problems of the Crimean Tatars. And also yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, the candidacy of a prominent Crimean Tatar woman, Emine Jafar, was approved for the position of First Deputy Foreign Minister, with responsibility, again, if I'm not mistaken, for Crimea and most importantly, I think, of public diplomacy. So are we seeing here the latest move in public relations direction, or do these measures, these steps this week represent, are they reflective of a genuine policy change and an attitude change towards Crimea? And with that, I would ask Anton Korinevich to make his opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Markian. Good evening, good morning, dear colleagues. It's a real pleasure to be here today with you and to talk on such an important issue, which we commemorated just on Monday, on the 18th of May, the crime of genocide, the crime of deportation of Crimean Tatars from their homeland. So starting with, I would say that we really prepared a lot to have this commemoration be held on a high level to show that Ukraine and Ukrainian establishment and Ukrainian politics remember the day of 18th of May 1944, and that for our country, the tragedy of Crimean Tatars as indigenous people of Crimea, as indigenous people of Ukraine, is really very important. So just few words to say what have we done on this very day. So first of all, we on a state level, on the level of the highest authorities as ministries, ministers, deputy prime minister, our mission of the president in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, we supported the message from Majlis of Crimean Tatar people to have the commemoration actions on the 17th of May. And these were the candles lighted in the windows of our homes in the evening of 17th of May. And these were also the Crimean Tatar national flags, which were risen up with the black stripe on the day of the 17th and on the day of the 18th of May. We also held a meeting of the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and of the Chief of Staff of the Office of the President and his deputies with the members of Majlis of Crimean Tatar people who reside on the territory of Ukraine, which is controlled by the government of Ukraine. So there were 7 members of Majlis, pretty much everybody who resides on the territory which is controlled by the government. Just 1 or 2 were absent due to the fact that they reside permanently in Kherson region. We also had I think, a very interesting incentive. This was the lesson within the framework of the project, which is under the auspices of the Office of the President and of the Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine. The lesson within the framework of all Ukrainian school online. So all the Ukrainian children, pupils, starting from the 7th grade to the 11th grade, had the opportunity to see online lesson on the issue of the tragedy of Crimean Tatar people, or the deportation of the Crimean Tatar people held on the 18th of May 1944. We also agreed with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, many thanks to Dmytro Kuleba himself, and the Ukrainian missions abroad and embassies abroad. A lot of them rose the Crimean Tatar national flag with black stripe on this very day. And of course, we also rose the Crimean Tatar national flag on the building of the main university of Ukraine, Kyiv Taras Shevchenko National University. And what is also maybe interesting to hear that on the 17th and on the 18th of May, the two buildings, the two principal administrative buildings of Kyiv, namely the Office of the President of Ukraine and the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine, had a very interesting installation with the national flag of Crimean Tatar with Tamga insignia and the national Ukrainian flag, with the wordings that 18th of May, the day of commemoration of the genocide of Crimean Tatar people. So I do believe that these commemoration actions were to show to Crimean Tatar people, both residing in the temporarily occupied Crimea and on the government-controlled territories, that the Crimean Tatar issue is very important for our country. Mark-Jan already mentioned that two important issues happened during the meeting of the president with the leaders of Majlis of Crimean Tatar people. Namely the task force or the working group, which will work out all the issues related to the Crimean Tatar people, starting from legal incentives, including the draft laws and the work on them, draft laws on indigenous people, on the status of the Crimean Tatar people, and on the relevant changes to the constitution of Ukraine, and all the other issues which deal with the interests of Crimean Tatar people, starting from housing, in Kherson region, in Kyiv, in Lviv, in Dnipro, and finishing with a big mosque which shall be built in Kyiv, a big Crimean Tatar mosque, which shall be built in Kyiv in some time. So I think that this working group, we are now working on how to establish it and how it shall function. But anyway, we deem that this will be a very important incentive. And of course, the position of Ms. Japar, who will work in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I think will deeply be important for the issue of Crimean issue on the international arena. But I would say that even before the appointment of Ms. Japar, we have a very strong cooperation with Mr. Kuleba, with MFA. I'm sure that now MFA is very effective and very active in Crimean issues. So we are thankful and grateful for that to Mr. Kuleba. But now, of course, with the appointment of Ms. Japar, I do believe that we will work out more important actions to be held on international level to show importance of Crimean issue for Ukraine and for international agenda. We agreed that we will meet, the Ukrainian officials who work on Crimea in some time, and we will sit on one table and we will discuss and see how we can enforce the issue of Crimea on the international arena. But anyway, even the next week, MFA and our mission of the president in Crimea, we're gonna participate in 2 meetings of OSCE, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. One is ODIHR, which is the human rights agenda, and the second is Forum on Security and Cooperation in Europe. So, of course, these events are now held online, only due to coronavirus issues, but we try to use any possibility to talk about Crimean issues on the international arena. And finalizing these introductory remarks, I would say that, of course, for the state of Ukraine, 18th of May of 1944 is a big tragedy and a big sorrow. This is a day where the whole Crimean Tatar people, indigenous people of Crimea and indigenous people of Ukraine, were forcibly transported from their homeland to other regions of Soviet Union. And we deeply understand that this is an act of genocide, and this is not only the deportation of the 18th of May 1944. This is a crime which prolonged for decades, because such conditions were created for the Crimean Tatar people that there were big problems for the living of the people in the surroundings in the Central Asia region. So we do believe that this is a big issue, and this is a real act of genocide, and we do commemorate this date. And for the state of Ukraine, it's very important now to secure the rights of Crimean Tatar people as indigenous people of Ukraine, and to give this, historical truth to the issue of Crimean Tatar people as indigenous people of Ukraine. So thank you very much for this opportunity to talk a bit on this issue. And I will be very happy to answer to your questions or comments, anything which is related to the issue which we today discuss. Thank you.
Earlier that we'll listen to the opening statements of our speakers and then move on to a Q&A. So please continue to send in your questions, which we will get to shortly. Ido, please, if we could have your comments. Could you engage your microphone, please? Oh, sorry. Okay, can we move to?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yes,
Okay,
your microphone is unmuted.
Okay. So,
Please.
first of all, I want to thank U.S. Ukraine Foundation for inviting me, and also to Anton Korinievich for giving such a good, promising news about the Crimean Tatar issues in Ukraine. My focus, excuse me, today, the focus of my talk is going to be human rights violations, structural violence, and targeted discrimination imposed upon Crimean Tatars in post-annexed Crimea. You might all know that, but I wanted to capture everything under 4 subtitles. One is the forced exile of intelligentsia. Anton was talking about Mejlis, which is now banned in Crimea, obviously. That's why it's continuing its work in Kiev. And not only Mejlis, but many of the intelligentsia of the Crimean Tatar people were ousted from Crimea after the annexation. These included some Mejlis members, and but also the journalists and newspaper and the TV programs were shut down, and most of the intelligentsia had to leave. Actually, today, almost 40,000 people, Crimean Tatars, had to leave Crimea because of this ongoing discrimination. The second one is policy of intimidation. What do I mean by that? Well, policy of intimidation, when they go to the houses to arrest people on trumped up charges, they come in balaclavas with machine guns, 6 a.m. in the morning. I have very good friends among these people who were arrested, unfortunately. Not funny, but I hear from their wives and from their mothers in some cases. And they attack to these houses with all these swear words and intimidate people. If neighbors come out and they watch these arrests and protest against it, they arrest those neighbors as well. And pursuing the policy of intimidation, Crimean security forces deliberately fabricate cases of terrorism and extremism. So first, Rafat Shubarov, Jemilev, they were the extremist terrorists. Mejlis was a terrorist organization. Now the people on the street are terrorists, especially if you are a member of Hizb ut-Tahrir, which is a religious group. Since its foundation in 1953, they never committed violence. And in Crimea, excuse me about my allergies. And it's very similar to Stalinist purges of 1940s, actually. Or if you are a member of the Crimean Solidarity Group, it's similar. They come, they arrest, and then this is the FSB and the Rosgvardia, which is National Guard of the Russian Federation, and arrest these people. But when they arrest these supposedly members of Hizb ut-Tahrir or Crimean Solidarity, they use secret witnesses, which nobody knows. Like, I can go there and say, yes, I saw him doing this and that. I know some of these people. I know the guy who is in jail right now for 17 years in Stavropol prison. I've been in their houses. I know his mother. And supposedly he had planned to destroy the government with violent uprising. I mean, these are, to me, it's so ridiculous. It's beyond belief. But Russia judges these people based on this false evidence, and they don't find any guns or anything like that. It's just a few books on Quran and Islam, whatever. And then they put these people in jail. Being in jail, even not that of a big deal if you think about it. But then they start hybrid deportations, which means they take the person who is in jail, they transfer it to colonies, prison colonies throughout Russia. This guy with the 17 years now, he's in Stavropol. And why do they do that? First of all, they just want to limit the contact with the families and children. Also, sometimes they don't even tell the lawyers that these people are moved. How do they move them? They put them in 50 by 50 centimeters glass containers, just like aquarium, and they transport these people to jail. Maybe it takes 16 hours, 20 hours, no toilet break, no food, no prayer allowance. So this is by itself a torture and human rights violation in its maximum. Prisons are a different story. You can never get medical help. They released one person, Adam Aga, and because he was very, very sick and he needed surgery. But today, especially with the coronavirus being very dangerous place in the prisons, they don't allow the prisoners to wear any mask, or they don't give them anything. I mean, in the first place, they don't give them anything. But now with the corona, they are more in danger. These prisoners from supposedly connected with Hizb ut-Tahrir, the institute in Moscow, Memorial, founded by Sakharov, they announced, they defined them as political prisoners, and Amnesty International have some of these people on their list. The third one that I wanted to talk about is the absurdity of the charges. For instance, there were two women in May, last May, who were charged by the Center for Countering Extremism of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia. Their fault was one of them, she was tagged by somebody on Facebook, and that was her extremism there, tagged. I could be tagging her and she goes to jail, that type of a thing. And the other woman is also something similar charge. They weren't allowed to visit with their lawyers, but because of the pressure, they let them out after 48 hours. But funny thing is, 2 days ago, 3 days ago, they were charged again, this time with a different woman. So man, woman, a man put a happy birthday for Mustafa Cemilev. They put him in jail because he didn't say Mejlis actually was banned in Crimea. So these are the ridiculousness of charges. Crimean people faces this targeted discrimination in Crimea today. Also, assassinations and murder. Although Putin said in his speech, we got Crimea without any loss of life, whatever. That's not correct. There are so many people, Reshad Ahmedov, Reshad Yayayev, and some other people were found either duct taped or with a noose on their necks. And one guy, actually, his bones were found in Nikolaevka. So there have been 40 abductions since the post-annexation, in post-annexation Crimea. And 8 of them are found dead, the others are still missing today. Obviously, the Russian government cannot imprison all Crimean Tatars. or kill them. Therefore, it applies, like I said before, a hybrid repression. They prison some, they forced to emigrate some others, and they did as they did in their oppressive Tsarist regime, and they intimidate the people, telling that these are extremists and terrorists. So if you think about it, since 1783, nothing much changed. In 1783, they were the enemies of the people, or Crimea without Crimean Tatars were the motto of the Imperial Russia. 1944, they were the traitors, so they were expelled to Central Asia and Europe. And now they are again extremist terrorists. And so they changed the definition of Crimean Tatars depending on the situation of the geopolitical factors in the world. But it's the same discrimination that has been going on. And this needs attention, not only from Ukraine, but from international community, because Crimean Tatars are indigenous people, and they are dying not only in numbers, but also in terms of their spirits. So that's all.
Thank you very much, Adil, especially for pointing out some of the absurdities, particularly the retroactive nature of so-called Russian justice in the legal system as it's being practiced today in Crimea. I'd like to now turn to Natalia Belitsa and just to let our listeners know that Natalia will be speaking in Ukrainian, so please adjust your audio settings accordingly. Thank you. Natalia?
Добрий день. Дякую за можливість взяти участь у цьому важливому вебінарі. Дякую організаторам його, а також попереднім спікерам, які висвітлили низку важливих проблем. Зокрема, дуже важливо, що пан Коренєвич продемонстрував, які саме зусилля докладає українська держава, аби проблема кримських татар, яка зараз настільки актуальна в світі 18 травня, тієї трагічної дати депортації, не зникала з порядку денного ані всередині України, ані на міжнародній арені. І також дуже дякую Іділь Ханум за те, що вона так детально розповіла про ці неймовірні утиски, страждання, переслідування, репресії, які спрямовані насамперед проти кримських татар. І я б хотіла особливу увагу на це звернути, оскільки одразу виникає питання, чому, якщо відсоток кримських татар в анексованому, окупованому Криму десь не більше, максимум 15, то доля їхня серед репресованих це десь, 80-90, згідно з різними підрахунками, дуже велика частка. І з цього випливає, що з одного боку російська влада вбачає саме в кримських татарах головний опір спротиву їхньої влади на окупованому півострові. І з іншого, я думаю, що і українська влада, і українське суспільство підійшли до розуміння того, що саме це є основна сила, на яку може спиратися Україна в усіх своїх зусиллях спрямованих на деокупацію Криму. І тепер хотілося б перейти до більш конкретних питань. Все ж таки, як саме ми бачимо цю деокупацію і як ми будемо просувати це питання на міжнародній арені? Хочу одразу зауважити, що ідея того, що оскільки Мінський процес не торкається питання Криму, абсолютно необхідне створення окремої додаткової міжнародної платформи, яка б спеціально переймалася саме питаннями Криму. І це той дуже рідкісний випадок, коли громадська думка підтримує намагання в цьому напрямку владних структур. І політичні партії, майже всі, і депутати, і основні профільні міністерства, здається, всі погоджуються з тим, що така міжнародна платформа є необхідною. Тому, мені здається, є час перейти до більш практичних питань. Якщо є консенсус загальний, то давайте думати, по-перше, хто саме має бути ключовими учасниками. І тут знов-таки переважна більшість при обговореннях погоджується, що треба залучити учасників і підписантів Будапештського меморандуму. Друга проблема – де саме може відбуватися оцей кримський процес, на відміну від Мінського. І тут я б хотіла нагадати про дуже цікаву і важливу пропозицію харизматичного лідера кримських татар Мустафи Ага Джемілєва, який ще в червні минулого року запропонував зробити цю площадку в Стамбулі. Більше того, він мав попередні розмови з міністром закордонних справ Туреччини, і той підтвердив готовність Республіки Туреччина до такого кроку і очікує офіційного звернення від України. Чому саме Туреччина, чому Стамбул? Тут є низка додаткових бонусів і переваг. По-перше, у всіх стає питання, а що ж Росія? Вона є з одного боку підписант меморандуму, а з іншого ніколи не погоджується на будь-яке обговорення питань Криму, стверджуючи, що це питання вже закрите, Крим російський і ніяких обговорень не може бути. Ну, треба тут згадати про дуже особливі стосунки персональні між президентом Ердоганом і президентом Путіним, і тим, що таке створюється враження з аналізу усіх подій, їхніх двосторонніх стосунків, що Росія більше зацікавлена в стратегічному партнері з Туреччиною, ніж навпаки, і відмовити Ердоганом, якщо він додасться свого боку до запрошення, буде набагато важче, ніж чим, наприклад, це виходило тільки від України. Не можна також забути, що в Туреччині існує величезна кримсько-татарська діаспора, а для Ердогана це важливий сегмент електорату. Він дуже зацікавлений в тому, щоб продемонструвати свої наміри щодо ефективної підтримки кримських татар. і вирішення проблем Криму. І це для нього була б велика перевага. Ну і крім того, двосторонні стосунки саме України з Туреччиною дуже важливі, зокрема в галузі військового промислового комплексу. Не буду на цьому зупинятися, але це дійсно дуже важливий напрямок української міжнародної політики. Є певні досягнення, і продемонструвати свою повагу, увагу і віддати належне такому партнеру, як Туреччина, для України важливе. Ну і last but not least, для Туреччини може бути зацікавленість, крім оцієї загальної кримсько-татарської проблеми і підтримки кримських татар не тільки на території Херсонщини, де відбуваються, ви знаєте, певні заходи для підтримки і надання матеріальної допомоги для внутрішньо переміщених осіб з Криму, кримсько-татарського походження, але й на території окупованого Криму. І тут логічно виникає питання, а з чим збирається вийти Україна? Уявімо собі в оптимістичному варіанті, що вдалося домовитися, міжнародна платформа вирішена, принаймні частина ключових гравців міжнародних погодилась на участь і обране місце. Тобто Україна, мабуть, має бути готова взяти участь в такій міжнародній платформі з підготовленою стратегією деокупації. Ну, для мене, як представниці громадянського суспільства і експерта незалежного, це трохи болюче питання, бо відстежуючи цей процес від початку, хочу зауважити, що хоча перша стратегія деокупації з'явилася ще влітку 2014 року, і авторами її були члени громадської організації благодійного фонду «Майдан закордонних справ». Потім цією проблемою переймалося РНБО. Зараз цим займається Офіс представництва президента України в АРК, яке очолює учасник нашого обговорення пан Антон Кореневич. Цим займається активно Міністерство закордонних справ. Не може, звісно, залишатися осторонь переформатоване Міністерство реінтеграції, бо це саме її профіль. І виникає питання. Хочу ще згадати, що, наприклад, політична партія «Голос» виробила і презентувала свою окрему стратегію деокупації. Тобто виникає питання, перш за все, координації всіх цих зусиль. Чи думає хтось над тим, щоб акумулювати, взяти найголовніше, найважливіше з кожної з цих окремих спроб і виробити дійсно якомога якісніший документ, а для цього дійсно якось більш ефективно наладити співробітництво між всіми тими акторами, які реально в темі, які займаються цим питанням, які розробляють свої пропозиції і які мають в кінечному підрахунку вийти з таким цілісним документом. Ми всі розуміємо, що конкретні деталі стратегії деокупації не можуть бути публічними, не можуть бути оприлюднені, але основні позиції, основні напрямки обов'язково заслуговують на те, щоб стати предметом ширшого публічного обговорення. Ну і тут виникає останнє, найважливіше, мабуть, питання в цьому контексті. Ну, а яким же ж ми бачимо майбутнє деокупованого Криму? І ця тема дуже добре знайома всім присутнім, ну і в першу чергу голові Офісу представництва президента ВРК. І таке враження, що всі зусилля, які в попередні роки спрямовані були на те, щоб довести, що найоптимальніший варіант адміністративного навантаження, адміністративного статусу деокупованого Криму в складі єдиної України, це мала би бути національна територіальна кримсько-татарська автономія. Це більш-менш ідея на слуху, але реальної інформації, глибшого розуміння, що ж це таке національна територіальна автономія, в чому полягають її особливості, чому це абсолютно природне, нормальне явище саме для унітарних держав, а не для федеративних. Це все потребує значно ширших інформаційних зусиль. І я сподіваюся, що вони будуть закладені. Да. Дякую. Я, здається, вичерпала свій час. Дякую за увагу.
Now, I thank you very much for your as always, substantive comments, and obviously you have the opportunity to maybe address some of these issues again in the questions that are coming in. I'd like now to turn to Lilia and Valida, and in my opening comments, I stated that your life has been shaped, or exile has been the formative experience in your life. Is that correct? And how has your experience, what kind of perspective has that, what you underwent? What kind of perspective is that giving you on contemporary and current events in Crimea, please?
So I want to start with the family history first. So Salam, I'm Velide Kent, and this is my mother, Lilia Nagaeva.
Yes, good morning.
We are Crimean Tatars, Americans. I would like to tell you the story of my family in the context of 1944 deportation. 76 years ago this week, on May 18th, my great-grandmother Gulsum and my great-aunts Nadire and Murvet were visiting and sleeping at a friend's house. Early in the morning, they were woken up and taken straight to the train station, loaded on cattle cars, no chance even to pack a bag. The Cherokee nation had its trail of tears, and the Crimean Tatar nation had its train of tears. Since my family were not in their house on that tragic morning, their possessions were their clothes on their back and high heels. You might ask, where were the men of the family? As many of other Crimean Tatar men who fought in the Soviet army, they were not home. My great-grandfather was shot by Nazis in 1942 in Simferopol, Crimea. My teenage grandfather and his younger brother were sent to a slave labor camp after volunteering to join the Red Army. Stalin and his NKVD secret police had a plan to get rid of indigenous peoples of Crimea, Crimean Tatars, after the peninsula was liberated from the Nazis by accusing them of collaborating with the enemy. It didn't matter if tens of thousands of Crimean Tatars were in the Red Army fighting the Nazis, and that teenage boys like my grandfather tried to volunteer in order to prevent any potential resistance to the May deportation. The young boys like my grandfather and his brother were sent to labor camps the month before the deportation. My grandfather and his brother were sent to a gulag in Guryev, Kazakhstan, where they dug a canal. The chief engineer was, believe it or not, one of those American communists who went to the Soviet Union during the Depression, driving a Studebaker, around the camp giving orders. When my grandfather Feridun ended up in the camp hospital, the Jewish head doctor kept him there because he reminded her of her son who had died in the war. Feridun tried to go back to work because his younger brother Fikret was still building a canal, malnourished and near death. The doctor brought him to the hospital too. A nurse nursed them to health. This was my grandmother Nina. Meanwhile, my great-grandmother and her daughters arrived to Uzbekistan among the 200,000 Crimean Tatars. During that horrid journey, many people died. My great aunt recalls that corpses were thrown out of the moving train in the steppe. Upon arrival to Uzbekistan, the Crimean Tatars were met by a very hostile local people with stones and shouts, "Enemy of the people have arrived, traitors." However, Uzbeks were puzzled to see mainly women and children getting off the trains. My great aunt, still in her high heels, was told to dig a dugout so the family could sleep there. This is how their life in Uzbekistan began. Almost 50% of Crimean Tatars were wiped out during the deportation in the following year. My paternal grandmother, Maube Ibragimova, was one of them, leaving my father Aziz motherless at age 3. Sometime later, Feridun, Fikret, and Nina were sent to another labor colony in Cheboksary, Russia, where Crimean Tatars were cutting lumber with other political prisoners and common criminals. My mother was born in the forest on the back of the truck in a heap of hay. Since my Russian grandmother worked as a medical officer in the security services, she found through her channels where my grandfather's relatives had been deported to. One day, she, my grandfather, his brother, and my 3-year-old mother quietly got on a ferry and left. No one was looking for them. They went to Uzbekistan. My mother's parents were not allowed to get married officially till 1956, after Stalin's death. By then, they had 2 children. Stalin's death also opened possibilities previously inaccessible to Crimean Tatars, including education. My grandfather attended university and became a doctor. My mother and aunt continued his legacy by becoming doctor and epidemiologist. Despite the odds stacked against them, my family, like other Crimean Tatars, were able to succeed. However, they were still forbidden to return home to Crimea and were forced to live in exile for 2 generations until 1989. I was born in exile. History repeated itself in 2014 when Kremlin agents occupied Crimea, forcing honest Crimean Tatars from their homes. Crimean Tatars once again are facing death, torture, and imprisonment in Crimea, or growing up in exile like I did. Thank you for participating in the seminar and for caring.
Thank you very much, Velida, for that personal story. It's always good to have a human dimension to fill in the kind of political discussions, which always seem to be a much higher and broader level. We have questions, so I'd like to turn to those now. The first question is actually from Mubayin Altan, who represents the American Association of Crimean Tatars. And I hope you won't mind if I shorten your question somewhat to its basics. We have been following the status of our compatriots closely when Crimea was part of Ukraine and now temporarily as part of the Russian Federation, and we are deeply concerned about their survival as people and as a nation. After decades of neglect, Ukraine began to pay attention to the Crimean Tatar problems. We appreciated former President Poroshenko's close relations with the Crimean Tatar Mejlis while it lasted. However, we are deeply concerned with President Zelensky's relations with the now exiled Crimean Tatar Mejlis. We are extremely disappointed that President Zelensky still has not approved financing for the only Crimean Tatar voice, ATR television. We are interested in finding out what is the current, what are the current relations between President Zelensky and the Crimean Mejlis. And is President Zelensky seriously interested in helping resolve the Crimean Tatar problem? Well, I think we've addressed most of the issues, but specifically, if Mr. Koronevich, if you could address the issue of ATR TV channel, because it is something that's raised here in Ukraine also.
Yeah, thank you very much, Markian, and thanks for the questions. Well, for the beginning, I will be rather short, but for the beginning, for President Volodymyr Zelensky, the issue of Crimean Tatars is very important. And again, I would stress that this Monday, on the 18th of May, President Zelensky met with practically all the Majlis members who are situated on the government-controlled territory of Ukraine. We talked pretty much an hour, and we again agreed to establish this working group to face all that legal challenges of which Ms. Belitzer kindly talked. The issue of indigenous people, of the constitutional amendments, and so on and so forth. Also the issue of the cooperation of the president and the office of the president with Majlis. So I think that here we do have rather nice perspectives, and I'm sure that we are all eager to do something good for Crimea and for Crimean Tatars. Maybe it may be also interesting for you that tomorrow in Verkhovna Rada, in the parliament, we will have the first meeting of the working group who will talk on decentralization issue for Crimea. As you know, now Ukraine is facing decentralization reform, and Crimea, as any other part of the territory of Ukraine, is also inside this. And all the members of Crimean Tatar community who wanted to become members of that working group will be there. So that we are talking about future of Crimea, of course, with respect to Crimean Tatars and their history and their interests. So I'm sure that sometime we'll go and we will see that we have some fruitful results. Regarding the issue of ATR channel, the issue is solved. There was an issue that this channel wanted to get financing from the state budget without specific procedures, without public procurement procedures. And the state of Ukraine agreed for that. So actually, this is a very huge benefit, which is not open to other private entrepreneurships. And ATR is a private channel. So this is not a state body. So what is now done? Verkhovna Rada has voted that the special procedure will be given to ATR channel to get state budget financing without state procurement program. So this is a huge move towards the ATR channel. And then the government actually worked out the issue how the money from the state budget will be given to ATR. So now the issue is solved, and now it's only the technicalities when the ATR channel will get the state money. But again, due to the importance of the issue, due to the understanding that this is the only independent Crimean Tatar channel in the world, Ukraine did this, and ATR will get the state money. Again, any other channel, any other private company in Ukraine does not have such benefits. I think that this is very important to mention and to stress on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Anton. I think
Пане
all
модераторе, не дозволите трохи
yes, please.
додати до відповіді? Можна? Я просто хотіла згадати, що щодо законодавчих ініціатив, ще в 2018 році було завершено опрацювання двох законопроєктів про статус кримсько-татарського народу і так званого рамкового про корінні народи України, а також пропозиції до зміни розділу 10 Конституції України про Автономну Республіку Крим. Більше того, на останньому засіданні робочої групи при Конституційній комісії, а я брала участь у розробці всіх цих законодавчих ініціатив. 4 години було присвячено тому, щоб узгодити між собою ці 3 документи, і вони настільки були ретельно виведені, що дуже хотілося б, щоб ця титанічна робота не опинилася марною, і щоб наступні decision-makers і розробники законопроєктів повною мірою засвоїли і використати вже готовий і, за думкою багатьох експертів, високоякісний продукт. Ну, а стосовно АТР, Кримсько-татарського телерадіоканалу, хочу зазначити, що це не просто якийсь особливий випадок, що держава фінансує приватний канал. Це випливає, між іншим, з зобов'язань України по відношенню до корінного народу. Це чітко зазначено в декларації ООН про права корінних народів, до якої Україна приєдналася в травні 2014 року. І оскільки тою постановою офіційно визнано статус кримських татар як корінного народу, то це не випадок, не просто жест доброї волі, це нормальне було б виконання державою її обов'язків по відношенню до корінного народу.
Markian, just 30 seconds.
Thank you, Natalia. And certainly, I think everybody can agree that it's very good news about ATR. And again, thank you, Natalia, for reminding everybody that it's not always necessary to reinvent the wheel when it comes to drawing up a legislation. Further question. Can anybody on the panel, or anybody on the panel would like to address the issue of stolen cultural artifacts from Crimea, and what are the and any ongoing legal efforts to recover them? We know, for example, that Ukraine unfortunately hasn't taken much of an interest officially in participating in UNESCO meetings where all kinds of statements are drawn up, and Russia is obviously dominating the dialogue when it comes to laying claim to, particularly to the return of exhibits from abroad. Would anybody like to address this issue? Okay.
I don't exactly know about the exhibits outside of the Crimean, but I can mention a few things about how the Russian Federation tries to destroy the Crimean culture, Crimean Tatar culture, by, for instance, under the disguise of renovating the Bahçesarayhan Palace or renovating some other places where they take the kerpiç, how do you say that in English? The bricks of the building, and they replace it with a 44 cents, which you can buy in any store from Spain, I think they ordered. So they are getting rid of the old and historically important bricks and other things from these buildings and replacing them with modern day Home Depot stuff that we have in America. So these are the destructions that they do. And we don't know where these bricks or stones are going. They might be taking them to Russia or selling them to someplace, or simply destroying them as they did during the Soviet time with the gravestones and everything that they used in the bathrooms. So there is an ongoing destruction of Crimean Tatar culture and language also, because Crimean Tatars on the street cannot talk their language. Otherwise, they are being yelled at. Or I know that in schools, for instance, although they encourage Crimean Tatars supposedly by law, but they discourage it in the schools. So this is all I can say.
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
The bricks, they're not bricks, they're the tiles on the roofs. So that's
Tiles. I'm sorry, I couldn't.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Idil. And certainly, I think this may be, should become a priority issue for the new Minister of Culture whenever he or she is appointed. Maybe Mr. Kuranevich could see to this. Okay, we just move on. The next question. What actions are being taken to ensure or assist the Crimean Tatars to preserve their language and culture through policy in Ukraine or help through international organizations? I think we've heard a lot about what's being done internally. Maybe a few words about what's being done with the assistance of the international community.
Well, I may start, yes, and maybe dear colleagues will follow. So internally, we in Ukraine we try to do as much as we can now to support Crimean Tatar identity, because we understand that the Russian Federation as the occupying power, it tries to erase the Crimean Tatar and Ukrainian national and cultural identity on the peninsula. So they are trying to create some kind of a new Soviet citizen, you know, who doesn't remember his or her origins, culture, religion, traditions, so on and so forth. So on the mainland Ukraine, we do have these programs of Crimean Tatar language and literature at universities. We do have some Crimean Tatar educational and cultural organizations, but there is still a lot of things for us to do. There is still a lot for state to invest efforts into Crimean Tatar cultural and identical issues on the mainland Ukraine. And talking about international assistance and international partners assistance, I would say that, of course, Turkish Republic, Turkey, gives a lot of efforts to support of Crimean Tatars. So as Ms. Beliter mentioned on the beginning of our event, Turkish Republic grants the programs for housings, dwellings, for cultural issues. So we may say that they are the most active partner in this event for Ukraine. And only briefly to react to Ms. Beliter, a former comment, of course, I mean, we do appreciate ATR channel and we are not talking anything wrong. We do want ATR channel to work and to function. So we do believe that this decision of Ukraine to fund ATR for another year, for year 2020, this is the right decision and this is a good thing to do. And talking about that draft laws, which Ms. Beliter mentioned, which were worked out in the Constitutional Commission of several years ago, we will of course take them into account. I mean, nobody is going to reinvent the wheel. Nobody is going to, I don't know, say that what was done that time is bad and we need to do something. So of course, I mean, we know these draft laws. We analyze them from the first article to the bottom, and we know that they are good incentives, and I think that we will work them on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anton. We're actually moving close. It's amazing how quickly time passes. There are a couple more questions, so I would ask people to be brief in their answers. The next question is more specifically to Natalia. How do you guard against Russian dominance in your proposed platform to be created in Turkey? We know that Russia has tried and been mostly successful to control many Black Sea initiatives. So if you could address that, Natalia, but quite briefly, please.
Дякую за запитання. Дійсно, Росія категорично відмовляється обговорювати це питання, принаймні в мінському форматі, і тут вона формально має підстави, бо не згадується в документах мінського процесу, крім одного неявного зауваження про територіальну цілісність України. Тому, як бачаться можливості участі або неучасті Росії в іншому окремому кримському форматі. Значить, я вже згадала, що якщо буде залучена Туреччина як хазяїн платформи територіально, то Путін дуже-дуже поважно ставиться до Туреччини і президента Ердогана, дуже цінує це партнерство і йому дійсно буде важко відмовитися. Але передбачені сценарії відмови не означає, що вся провальна ця ідея, тому що на першому етапі, як вже зауважили низка українських експертів, не обов'язкова реальна участь. Цілком можливо оцю стратегію деокупації обговорювати підписантами Будапештського меморандуму і, звісно, на чолі з Україною, із залученням Туреччини. Можливо, також цікаво подумати над Францією і Китаєм, які свого часу приєдналися до цього Будапештського меморандуму. А Росії головне запросити, висловити намір залучити. Ну, а якщо вона відмовилась, то це виходить її біда чи її проблема. І якщо зорганізувати більш-менш консолідований міжнародний тиск на Росію саме в проблемі Криму, змусити її нарешті брати участь в таких переговорах, то я думаю, що, по-перше, в цій пропозиції є шанс успіху, а по-друге, навіть за умови відмови Росії, вона радше програє, ніж виграє на міжнародній арені. Але мистецтво дипломатії тут Україна має показати дуже високе. Ну і наостанок, реагуючи на схвальну репліку пана Коріневича, я б хотіла зауважити, що всі ці питання, які саме мають бути стосунки між державою, суспільством і корінним народом, як часткою цього суспільства, я б дуже хотіла ширше якось використати всі акумульовані з цього приводу знання і інформацію. Це моя книжка, це вже друге видання українською, і якби не карантин, вона б вже вийшла ще англійською і російською, сподіваюся, це станеться. Тут всі ці речі, які багато хто з політиків не розуміє ще, на жаль, вони просто викладені. І це питання саме поінформованості може більшою мірою, ніж наявність чи брак політичної мови.
Okay, thank you, Natalia. Really, I think sometimes diplomats forget, politicians forget that the important thing is to invite the Russians. It's their prerogative whether they show up or not. And in fact, maybe sometimes it's even more constructive to speak to an empty chair than to speak with the Russian representatives. Before we move on to concluding remarks, I'd just like to mention that we have an anonymous admirer who has pointed out that it was especially wonderful to have Lilia with us on this broadcast. Thank you, Lilia and Velida, for bringing your mother along with you today. And with that, then, I would like to turn to our participants for their concluding remarks, beginning with Anton.
Thank you, Markian. I will start with saying that that book, which Ms. Belitzer just showed us, I remember reading it on a night train Kyiv-Kherson, which I use quite often. So this is a really very good source to find out more about Crimean Tatars as indigenous people. And I think that the biggest issue is that it's not the absence of political will. I mean, nobody is really against Crimean Tatars. Nobody is willing to show that Crimean Tatars should not receive something. It's a matter of communication and the matter of understanding. While we work with Ukrainian politicians, we feel that even the highest levels, they don't feel the difference, let's say, between indigenous people and national minority. And we need to start talking in depth, what is the difference, why Crimean Tatars do have some rights and national minorities, for instance, do not. Not because they are bad, but because this is different category. So that I think that the main issue for us now is to communicate these issues, and the communication of these issues to Ukrainian politics, to the parliament, to the government, to everybody, is really, really very important. And if this will be communicated in the right manner, and the Rada will understand for what they vote, what draft law is now being voted for. And I mean, now Rada is a very interesting instrument. For instance, now in the Rada, one of the draft laws to which I am a co-author is being discussed. And I see that really politics prevail above the legal issues. So, I mean, in such I would say, red thin lines, and in such important issues, in such crucial issues as Crimean Tatars, we need to be sure that all these incentives will be voted for, all these incentives will be supported. And again, I see that people in government, people in the Rada, people in the office of the president, politics, they are ready to work on this issue. So I do believe that some time will go, and we will do some good things for Crimean Tatar indigenous people. Thank you.
Idil, if you could
Yes.
summarize, please.
First of all, thank you again for everybody here. As I mentioned before, 40,000 Crimean Tatars had to leave Crimea because of the ongoing pressures. And immediately after that, Russian Federation settled between 850,000 to 1 million Russian citizens to Crimea. So this was very similar to 1783 and 1944, where a Crimean Tatar population is displaced outside the homeland, and imported people from Russia comes and settles in the Crimean, on Crimean lands. They were giving housing and other benefits, some of them military, but even the other ones. And this reminds me of the validation of the Zhemilev statement on April 17, 2014, where he told the reporters that the Russian Federation is leaning toward a renewed deportation of Crimean Tatars from the peninsula. The deportation of Crimean Tatars in 2014 is not going to be on cattle trains as it was in 1944, but will more likely be a softer option as it was in 1783, when Imperial Russia seized the land from Crimean Tatars and destroyed the intelligentsia, by assassinations, imprisonments, scare tactics, intimidations, which paved the way for forced migrations. That's exactly the point. He saw this in 2014, April, and this has been going on until now. I am not at the moment very hopeful about the occupation of Crimea. First of all, for NATO and Russia, you know, the conflict between NATO and Russia, Russia always wanted to have like see somehow. And now yesterday's talk was, you know, this was a very good point that was made yesterday, that Georgia and Ukraine should maybe cooperate, but obviously this isn't going to happen. Also, one of my research topics with Fulbright was the Russian organizations in Crimea during the Ukrainian era. And I know how much they emphasized being a part of Russia, even during Ukraine's time. And now these people are in the government. Aksionov from the Russian Unity, Shuvaynikov from the Russian Front, many other people, Rodivilov, Natalia knows him very well in all the attacks on Crimean Tatars during the Ukrainian era. So these people are in the government, backed by Kremlin and Putin. And we have the issue of NATO and everything. So I really am not very hopeful. But as I said in one of my recent articles, so I cannot say next year in Simferopol, but hopefully in our lifetime, we will see the assembly of all Crimean Tatars in Crimea. I'm hopeful, inshallah. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Ida. Natalia, a few concluding remarks, please.
Да, ну я ще раз щиро дякую всім учасникам і тим, хто задавав питання. Хочу сказати, що неможливо було в рамках формату цього вебінару охопити всі важливі питання стосовно Криму і кримських татар. Тому коротко означу, що могло би бути темою наступних обговорень. Перше, це подання позову додатково до всіх інших Україною в рамках порушення Росією практично всіх норм і статей 4-ї Женевської конвенції про захист цивільного населення під час війни. Бо всі останні резолюції, звіти, правозахисні міжнародні організації зауважують окремі порушення окремих статей, в той час, як це можна звести в цілісний документ. Друге, я вважаю, що час настав, зокрема громадянському суспільству, активніше і ефективніше сприяти тому, щоб в питанні звільнення затриманих, ув'язнених політичних в'язнів на території Криму і вивезених в Російську Федерацію кримчан, в першу чергу кримських татар, нарешті вимагати повного не просто включення їх в список, а реального здійснення цього кроку. Бо вже черговий раз надії на це були і під час останнього обміну провалені, і це далі так тривати не може. Ну і нарешті стосовно необхідності ширшої інформаційної кампанії, останній приклад. Ви всі знаєте про нові санкції, які були введені Україною, РНБО і указ, підписаний президентом Зеленським 14 травня. У багатьох шок. Що таке провідні російські музеї, провідні наукові установи Росії підпали в цей санкційний список? Тобто Україна зробила недостатньо, аби пояснити, поінформувати, що це не просто так ми рвемо культурні зв'язки з Росією, що всі ці установи підпадають під санкції саме із-за Криму. Тому що всі вони були задіяні у вивезенні, у фактичному пограбуванні анексованого півострова, його культурної спадщини, його культурних пам'яток. І це тільки один приклад, як необхідна ефективніша інформативна політика. Дякую за увагу.
Thank you, Natalia. And Velida and Lilia, please, your comments.
So thank you very much for bringing the attention of Crimean Tatars and people in occupied Crimea and issues they face every day outside of Ukraine. So to people who can be hear about the issues not just in Ukraine but outside of it. Thank you, the foundation. And I believe and I hope that Crimean Tatars would be more represented in different parts of the government, and the voices of people in the occupied territory in Crimea, Crimean Tatars and others, will be actually heard by Ukrainian government, and they will not be forsaken. And it's just be Crimea is Ukraine, and we need to work on it to bring it back home. So. Yeah, thank you so much for caring.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. So all that remains is on behalf of the US-Ukraine Foundation for me to give a big thank you to our panelists, an even bigger thank you to our audience, participants. And I would like to apologize to any people whose questions I didn't have time to get around to. And I look forward to our meeting again sometime using this marvelous technology that we're all only just getting used to using. So thank you, everybody, and good night from Kiev.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do I leave? That's it.
Unless they want to stay and have a debrief or something.